Right, good morning. Welcome everyone to Friday Cafe. We're so glad to have you with us. I'm Judy Carson. I'm with the Connecticut State Department of Education. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the fourth in a series of our virtual Friday Cafes that we've convened at your request during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this has been a wonderful way for us to share over the last few weeks and to support each other during this, as we say, unprecedented time. And today we're going to shift a little bit, and we're going to talk today about equity. And recent events over the past couple of weeks have brought into bright light another pandemic in our country. And that's a pandemic about racial justice. And we've seen lots of activity and protests the last few weeks. And so today what we want to do is take a shift and elevate the conversation around equity. And specifically, we're going to talk about the role of youth and youth voice, which is, I think, a wonderful way to end our four-session series. I also want to say that today is June 19th, and we're celebrating the 155th anniversary of the liberation, emancipation of enslaved peoples. And I want to take just a moment in recognition of Juneteenth, and also in recognition of the protests that have been happening these last few weeks, and share with you this short video. If you're interested, this video appears today on the front page of Google, and it has a beautiful narration with it.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won.
And more locally here in Bushnell Park, I found this on social media. A couple of Crec teachers organized a march of very young children. And you can see on the left there, they aren't really quite ready for adult marches, but the children wanted to organize and they wanted to speak out. And you see on the right, a young lady who just turned 9 and her family. And she was part of this, and she wanted to speak up for herself and speak out for her culture. So even young children, it's never too young for us as adults to listen to young people's voices, and in some ways to be led by the youngest of our fellow citizens, and so much that we can learn from our youth. So we're excited to bring that to you today. So I'm going to turn this over to my friend and colleague, Betsy Laborious, who's going to talk more, just to give you an intro, an overview of how this day is going to roll. and a little bit more about Friday Cafe.
Thank you very much. I welcome everyone, welcome everyone to Friday Cafe, whether you're from Connecticut, or my understanding is many people here from other states. We have 174 people that are registered to date and continue to enter. Again, welcome. The agenda, as we've designed Friday Cafe, is what we have is a short TED-like talk for folks, and typically and normally we find wonderful resources in Connecticut in terms of practitioners and the work that they're doing. Now I would like to introduce another partner and a collaborator, an important person who has helped us to really think about Friday Cafe and actually think about the theme for today's topic. And so I'd like to introduce Dr. Regina Hopkins, and I'm going to hand it over to her. Welcome, Regina.
Thank you. So I am just delighted to be able to introduce our conversation catalysts, who are racial equity warriors. They are individuals committed to the authentic and caring and respectful establishment of connections and interactions with students and families. And they are individuals who understand the critical importance of privileging and amplifying student and family voice, particularly in public school spaces, and more specifically as it impacts district and school decision making. And so we will have an opportunity today to learn more about one of the powerful examples of that by hearing a little bit about Manchester's Youth Equity Squad, or YES, which is just a phenomenal acronym, right, for action-oriented social justice. And so we look forward to that. But please join me in giving a warm welcome to Latasha Easterling Turnquest, who is the Director of Family Partnership, Erin Ortega, who is the Interim Chief of Staff, and Ashley Okwazi, who is the Youth Empowerment Coordinator. We are excited to hear from you and to learn more about what is underway in Manchester Public Schools. Hi, guys.
Hello, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. We're just sharing our screen with you.
Bear with us for a moment.
Yes. Hello, everybody. As mentioned, I am Ashley Okwazi, here with Dr. Ortega and Ms. Latasha Turnquest.
Morning.
We would just love to share our journey with you all and explain just a little bit about why our young people are our heroes. So we welcome you to this space. What you're going to find is a lot about what we're going to talk about. We learned from working with the young people, from the way that we introduce to the way that we speak and engage virtually, even to the way that we talk about the work and the passion that stems from within. So we thank you and welcome you to this space. I was told that because we only have 30 minutes that I have to keep it swift. So if you find that I'm talking fast, it's because I could talk a lot. So I apologize in advance. But I also want to take a moment to shout out our Manchester folks who are here with us today. Miss Tracy, Miss Aisha, Mr. Matt. We have Miss Althea, Tia. Thank y'all for being here with us. We love y'all and supporting the squad. It's always needed. And this is the family, and we're here. So I'm not going to do another round of introductions. Just want to let you know this is Grape Juice. We were at a Nellie Mae convening, and it's breakfast time. It is really important that we just take a moment to pause and to just give thanks to our ancestors who really paved the way for us to be here. I can say as a student and now as an educator myself, Juneteenth was not something that I learned about in schools. It wasn't something that I didn't learn about until even after college, which is something that we could be shameful for, but the fact that we've made progress, that we are where we are today, is something that I also want to elevate and be grateful for. So what I'm going to ask everyone virtually to do is to join us in a unified clap. So I'm going to ask you to take your hands like this, and on a count of 3, we're going to send one unified clap, which is going to extend our positive energy, our love and appreciation all the way to our ancestors. So on a count of 3, we're just going to clap one time. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. So we're just going to talk a little bit about our purpose, for why we are here. The young people that you see on the screen are members of our Youth Equity Squad. There are a few others who are missing, but what's really important is we want to share our journey with you. We want to amplify and center youth voices, specifically those with marginalized identities, especially racially marginalized identity. We also want to engage with the YES experience. So again, like I said, a lot of what this presentation will resemble is what the students actually do in their own workshops. And to prioritize intergenerational dialogues, we often have this stigma where young people and adults can't collaborate in the same spaces, but that's actually where a lot of magic and change happens, when young people are actually centered in leading the work. And of course, to highlight the value and impact of engaging families in race and equity work. So I want to also extend a huge shout out to one of our YES family members who's joining us and who you'll have an opportunity to hear from later on. So thank you, Mariama and Tati, for being with us today. So welcome to the space, Youth Equity Squad style. When our young people engage in running workshops, they, again, welcome people to the space, invite people to acknowledge our ancestors, but they also go over some really important norms because of the important discussions that they engage people in. You can see some of the norms here. If you look at the picture to the top left, this is a picture from our family engagement night where young people were actually reviewing and leading the welcome and the norms with families, their families, and parent leadership members. This video here, I'm not going to be able to play it because the volume is really low, but this is one of our youth members, Jared, who is presenting and explaining the norms and why they're important in race and equity discussions in front of a group of first-year teachers in Manchester. So there's over 60-something staff members at the new teacher orientation, where we always make sure we set the stage by welcoming people to the space and acknowledging our norms.
Peace and love, everyone. So I just want to quickly go through kind of how the Youth Equity Squad came to be. So first and foremost is a necessary commitment to elevating youth voice. So without making that commitment as a district, we would not be able to do half of the things that you're going to hear about today. So that's number one, definitely commitment to elevating youth voice, particularly youth with marginalized identities. And so we simultaneously determined that we wanted to include youth members in some of our conferences. And so CIRC is there because we sent a group of young people with adults to the Dismantling Systemic Racism conference a few years ago now. And while that was happening, we were applying for a Nellie Mae grant to help us uncover the root causes of inequities. And so from there, we came together, adults and young people, to think about what next steps would look like. Young people were given the space to determine where they wanted to pursue learning, you know, what they wanted to do over the summer, and adults sat there in space with young people and supported that process. And so from there, we came up with the Summer Institute, and that has happened for 2 summers? Mm-hmm. For 2 summers so far, and we're thinking about what it might look like this summer in a virtual environment. We've already learned that young people are, you know, much quicker to adapt to technology than us adults. So we're really excited to pursue some virtual opportunities. Adults and young people coming together in space was really important. As Ashley mentioned, intergenerational dialogue is where a lot of learning takes place. So our district equity team came together kind of organically. We had a group of adults who wanted to work in solidarity with young people. And so coming together, you know, we focused a lot on initially on community building, relationship building, just sharing our stories with one another. And the district equity team was formed out of that, which has now grown significantly to 4 subcommittees. We can talk a little about that today, but you won't hear a lot about that because we are focusing on the Youth Equity Squad. But that is an important space where all stakeholders will make decisions to set priorities and align strategies with district improvement goals.
So during the Summer Institute, the young people really had 2 main focuses. One was to establish really strong relationships, not only with their peers from diverse backgrounds, but also with their ACEs, Adults in Solidarity. Because without those strong relationships, it makes it very difficult to have courageous conversations and to really be vulnerable and to trust people with your lived experiences. And especially as young people, not knowing what adults you can trust, it was really important that we created the space to amplify and center the voices of the young people and allow them to build those relationships. The second thing was, in regards to race and equity work that was happening and taking place in Manchester, especially as a result of our ISCA report, which Dr. Ortega will talk about in a moment, the young people came up with their own priorities and goals that they wanted to tackle and address, which include ensuring that students of color are supported and engaged in learning by building students, families, and teachers' awareness, skills, and solidarity. Utilize restorative practices. We have a phenomenal restorative practice coordinator, Ms. Bernice Washington, who works collaboratively with our young people, which is so important, not only for young people to understand restorative practices, but also for them to understand the self-care and the need to process and how to process with others. To collaborate with staff to revise curriculum and instructional practices to be culturally relevant. Again, as Dr. Ortega mentioned, we engage in reviewing curriculum using multicultural, Paul Gorski's multicultural framework. And then to continue the ISCA dialogues to generate understanding and commitment towards racial and educational equity in PS. So before I even move on, you might be asking yourself, what is this ISCA report that you're talking about? And Dr. Ortega does a beautiful job explaining that, so I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you. So ISCA was a long process. So I can't even remember the time frame now. So 3.5 or 4 years ago, Manchester Public Schools partnered with Recenter and EdChange to implement an assessment that really was an equity-informed school climate assessment. It took us probably 1.5 years to develop what that assessment looked like, because we, number one, had to build relationships with each other. So we had team leads from Manchester Public Schools. So myself, Rhonda Filbert, our equity coordinator, and Luis Moyano, our coordinator of Title I programming and after school partnerships. So we worked with Recenter, as I said, and really spent a lot of time centering youth voice throughout that entire process. So before even developing a survey, we had Recenter meet with young people and ask them how to ask questions, basically. So before doing anything, we really wanted to uplift youth voice. And so they guided the entire process for us as adults, which was really hard. We had to let go of a lot of control. So it took a lot to do that. But ultimately, we developed an assessment that was really comprehensive. It involved focus groups, interviews, background data, surveys. We collected so much qualitative data through site visits, one-on-one conversations. There was so much data involved. And so out of that was generated a 106-page report. Tells us, a lot about what Manchester Public Schools is doing well, and a lot of information on what we can work on. So that was a long process. And from there, we wanted to look at that data and allow others to look at that data with us. So we met with our district equity team, including the Youth Equity Squad, went through a synthesizing process. So young people determined which quotations, which stats they wanted to uplift out of that data, and then that ISCA Gallery Walk is kind of a result of that. So we came up with poster designs so that people can walk through and see the data that was important for our Youth Equity Squad to highlight. Did I forget anything?
No, that was beautiful. And if I can mention, if you're interested in checking out that ICE report, it can be found on the Manchester Public Schools website as well. The young people had played a critical role in speaking to the anecdotal stories that existed in that report, so bringing it to life because it was a part of their lived experiences. And if I must add, it's really important that when we're talking about race and equity, that we don't exclude white children, students with Asian backgrounds, etc., because this is not a person of color issue where the students of color are responsible for leading this race and equity discussion and work. So what you will see is that there is a diverse group of young people, racially young people involved in this dialogue and this conversation.
Can I just say one more thing about ISCA? So in our conversations and planning, we really intentionally centered race. So there's a lot of intersectionality that comes out in the report, but you will see a very intentional focus on race, because race is the container of all our other identities.
Absolutely. Going backwards.
So I just want to highlight that this work definitely doesn't happen in isolation. Our district has made a commitment to racial equity. We have 4 district improvement goals tied to equity. So leadership, professional learning, elevating student voice, and teaching and learning. So youth voice and family engagement that is racially equitable cannot happen in isolation without a district commitment to embedding that in the rest of the work that's happening. So we have, as I said, we have work going on with leadership, professional learning in and out of district, student voice, not only youth equity squad, but really engaging young people in other decision-making processes, and teaching and learning. So as Ashley mentioned, using Gorski's multicultural framework to really take a deep and long, hard look at our curriculum that's existing, and thinking about how to make that more inclusive. And then orientation was mentioned. So we did involve young people in the new teacher orientation this year. It was very well received. The feedback was wonderful. We had interview processes include young people, and we look forward to building in more opportunities for young people to make decisions with us in the future.
Awesome. So with that, shout out to our superintendent, Matt Geary, who, again, as our district leadership has prioritized. And when we say prioritize, he not only prioritized through his expectations and his messaging, but also through budgeting and funding, how he allocates funds to support and elevate and center youth voices. We can't give young people a voice because they already have a voice, but systemically and traditionally what school systems in the public has done is minimized and isolated the voices of young people, especially those with marginalized, racially marginalized backgrounds. So to do this work in a public school setting is going completely against the grain of what we do as traditional educators who work in a system that I personally don't believe in.
And so I have a heart at the center of my little chart here, because while the chart is, technical in nature and some of these things may sound technical, this is really adaptive work. This is work of the heart. This is self-reflection, a daily look at, how race impacts your life. So as a white person, I've learned that every day I need to pause and reflect, because I did not grow up talking about race on a daily basis. So that must be intentional. This is heart work. So there are technical things that you will see, but as a district, we recognize that this is really work of the heart and the self.
14 minutes. So you'll see some images here, just to give you a little taste of some of the things that our young people experience and go through. They've been invited to speak on a podcast with Hartford Foundation. They've had connections and workshops with Dr. Ken Hardy and Tim Wise. We have young people and adults working in collaboration to build and develop workshops. You also see students analyzing and processing the ICE report, going through an activity where they're acknowledging and processing privilege, identity, and intersectionality. As Dr. Tega mentioned, this might look good and this might seem really fun, but it is not easy work. It's also not easy to take a back seat as an adult and allow young people to speak and to drive the ship. Because there's a lot of trust issues that we as adults have when it comes to letting young people lead that we need to work on within our own selves. So it looks good, and I know that youth empowerment and centering youth voices, just like other things like restorative practices, becomes a jargon or a fad, but the true work is the sustainability and how you're actually integrating it into the work of your district, into the systems that are happening in your schools. So then we talk about bridging the gap. So we talk about the development of our Youth Equity Squad, how it came to be, how we wanted to provide spaces, create spaces where we amplify and center youth voices. But there's a huge voice missing from this particular journey that we've been going on, right? And that was the voices of our families. So the voices of our families were missing, and it kind of, again, happened organically. We, each of us, have connected individually with families, but I know that, Dr. Ortega, Ms. Latasha, and myself have all had different conversations with students, families, and staff about what that actually looks like.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So while other conversations were happening, I also, in my bucket of work, one of the things I do is parent leadership. And it's usually a UConn PEP course, or, just giving families information on what's happening in the district. And Dr. Ortega and I one day were sitting in this exact room, and we kind of looked and said, we need to, what we call is Manchesterize it. Meaning, in Manchester, we'll see something that we like and we'll do it. And then all of a sudden it'll be like, okay, now it's time to take it, change it, get rid of some stuff, and make it for our community here. And I also am a resident of Manchester, so I am very invested. So with the parent leadership workshops that we were doing, shouts out to UConn PEP, where we kind of took the framework of that and we made it an 8-week session where we embedded the Youth Equity Squad into 2 of those sessions. And as Erin and I were sitting here going through the curriculum and gutting it and putting things in and throwing videos, we were having a conversation around how powerful it would be to get not the families involved. So the parent leadership adults, yes, but how about also joining in with the families of the Youth Equity Squad members? Like, how powerful would it be to see a workshop where, their child, their student is presenting this powerful information? So that's where that idea was. And once, when you work with a group of people and you work so well and the intention is always about what's best for our students and our district, things just happen so quickly and easily and naturally. It's a lot of work. And that's how those family engagement nights were born.
So as Ms. Latasha mentioned, the young people organized to develop and create because they wanted to share not only the work that they do with their schools and the community at large, but specifically with the people who mean the most to them, and that's their families. Right. So these slides that you see on the screen are the original work of some of our young people who designed and facilitated the family engagement nights. I wanted to stay true to their authentic creativity and keep the slides as is. And they talk about who they are, young people who want to make Manchester a more equitable place for marginalized groups. And they also wanted to highlight some of the hard work that they have been up to and what they've been doing. These young people work really hard. We talk about tokenism. We talk about not being tokenized, but to ask yourself 3 questions. What is this work doing for you? What is it going to do for your immediate audience? And what is it going to do for your community at large? So before we engage or present these opportunities to young people, we actually have them reflect, because it's easy to say yes, because being young and being in the forefront of such incredible transformational change is a beautiful thing, but it also is very draining. And we knew we needed the support of families to be able to support students when they were no longer with us. And long and behold, the families thought the same thing as well. So here's some photos from our family engagement nights, where students have a framework where they like to run their workshops, where they welcome people to the space, they invite you to a unified clap, review norms, but they also facilitate intentional icebreakers. At these particular family engagement nights, students wanted to engage families in analyzing and reviewing the ISCA report, because they've invested so much time and work in talking and learning and really processing their lived experiences. So they wanted to do that with their families. So you see at the tables, young people facilitating those dialogues with some of their family members, which is really powerful, because families really walked away better understanding how to support their students, their kids.
And what you don't see, which is very, very important, because if we didn't have it, we may not have had that many people, is the childcare piece. And we provided dinner and a full on dinner. Thanks for funding. But that was very important, because we had to know that all barriers were diminished when we attempted to have these family engagement nights. So what you don't see again is the child care piece, and that there was a huge dinner in the beginning.
And in addition to that, the family engagement nights were a 3-hour event over the course of 2 nights. The first night was really heavily focused on mingling, building relationships, and simply just going through the gallery walk. The second night was really focused and dedicated onto processing and being able to pick apart and to be able to not only challenge, but to ask questions and hear the voices of people of color who had those lived experiences, people with marginalized identities who had lived experiences similar to what was presented in the ISCA data.
And remembering, these included adults from the Manchester town and also the parents, guardians of the Youth Equity Squad members. So 2 different parental groups coming together.
Awesome.
We also engaged the Board of Education in this process, which I didn't mention before. I don't think it was mentioned prior to this, but this process evolved. So initially we definitely wanted the board to see this data and engage with young people, but the young people after that experience really just took on the ownership of it and made it their own process. So it really evolved from there and became 2 days, as was mentioned already. So I just want to acknowledge that.
So the rooted in relationships is something that's extremely prioritized in this work, especially because sending an email, sending a flyer, or simply just talking on the phone is not enough. You have to show up at people's houses. You have to invite people to come in, and if they don't come to you, you go to them. And that's when you start to break the barriers and the chains where the schools and families don't have that trust and build the trust. So we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, so we're just going to continue to go through the presentation, and I do want to get to Mariam and Tati. After the family engagement night, families they wanted to be more involved with teachers. They wanted to connect with teachers. So we invited families to participate in our district equity team meetings. So you'll see that there's a combination of staff, district consultants, district leadership, teachers, and families and young people at our district equity and community partners present at the district equity team meetings. Understanding the connection and purpose for bridging the gaps. Just some words from some of our family, Youth Equity Squad families. And what I really want to highlight are what's highlighted in green. This mom, Erin, she said, family engagement nights are so meaningful and impactful to me because they give the youth the ability to lead, educate, and encourage their parents on issues that parents may never have thought about. She also says, reading and dissecting the research data and learning from voices in our community that have completely different lived experiences is impactful in opening people's eyes and igniting change action. A student said, second, parents are also a huge part of our support systems. Having my parents engage in the learning and work that I do allows us to relate and gives them some insight into how heavy this work really is. This helps them better support me in a lot of different ways, whether it's helping me find resources for learning, recognizing when I just need a mental break, or helping to elevate my voice as well as other youth voices. This particular parent said, as a parent, the engagement nights provide a way for me to form an understanding and have a new perspective. So this is all important feedback, because we constantly are looking for feedback to drive the work that we're doing moving forward, how we allocate funding, et cetera. And it's also important too that we continue to engage not only our families of color, but also our families who are white, who want to know more, or who may be afraid to talk about race because they don't want to say the wrong thing. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and if I can ask for you to allow Mariama and Tati to kind of share their experiences. We have a couple minutes where I would like to just ask Tati and Mariama specifically to just talk about their experiences in the family engagement nights and why being a part of DS Family has been so impactful and important to them. Tati, I just wanted to give you all an opportunity just to share with everyone your experiences with the family engagement nights, why they were so impactful and important to you, and a little bit about your experiences in general with the engaging in the race and equity work.
For me, as a parent with regards to family engagement, I think for me it was important to be a part of this, because while the work that the children do is deeply satisfying, it's hard. I think children need a support system at home to not only have the dialogue, but to express their feelings, process thoughts, process situations. They need to know that they're not in the work alone, more importantly, and to feel reassured that their parents are not only there physically, but that they're there emotionally, and to learn from them alongside and for the long term. For me, Family Engagement Night was most impactful because it was a chance to not only meet other families and children of the Youth Equity Squad, but to connect in a way that goes beyond anything I've ever experienced before. It was an opportunity to build relationships, build on my relationship with Tatiana, and a partnership with those students and allies who work alongside her in this work. And for me as a parent, I think it's important to be present at Family Engagement Nights, not only in a supportive role, as I mentioned earlier, but with our allies as well, and to be actively engaged ourselves, to be open to challenge our own perspectives as we come into this, our own implicit biases as it pertains to this work, and to better have an understanding of what our children do and our allies as a whole. We as parents, we need to listen, we need to see, we need to be part of the conversation, and remain cognizant at all times that our children are at the forefront. They're the leaders of this work. So I am honored to be a part of this, so thank you.
Thank you, Mariam and Tati. Again, like Mariam said, the relationships are so important. It's so central. And if we're talking about sustaining this work and not letting it be a fad, equity is a fad. When we talk about it in sense of a term, it's easy. And if you're not talking about it, then it's a problem. But we also need to create sustainable changes, and including our families to support students at home is equally as important. So we want to leave you just with some final thoughts and some takeaways as to why we continue to do this work and engage in this work. And for me, it's because as a selfless young Black female who grew up in Manchester, who's now an educator, I want to be able to create experiences that a select few of educators and mentors such as Diane Kearney has created for me. I want to be able to create those impactful moments for my students, all of my students, but specifically to eliminate barriers for those who look like me.
And for myself, again, I shared earlier that I'm a resident of Manchester, also property owner here, and I'm not saying any of that to impress you, just to impress upon you how invested I truly am. And I believe that this work, one of the slides showed, cannot be done in isolation. What we've learned during this interim learning opportunity is how crucial relationships are. If your child does not have a great relationship with your teacher, 9 times out of 10, they were not on Google Meet or Zoom, or they were like, I didn't want to hear her voice, his or her voice then. I definitely don't want to hear his or her voice while I'm at home. So relationships, relationships, relationships. And that's what we're doing on my end for the family engagement piece. So extremely important.
So for me, I live every day just thinking how I can leave my mark on this world, how I can be a better ancestor and how I can leave behind positive energy. And so every day I do what I can to do self-reflection, to have that personal change happen within myself, but also contribute to mobilizing our community. Manchester is an amazing community with so much to bring to the table. I have learned so much from the Youth Equity Squad and their families, and it's about mobilizing the entire community so the community can say, this is our future, this is our direction, let's go.
I don't know how we did this in 30 minutes, but we did. I appreciate you ladies, and I appreciate Mariama and Tati and our Manchester family. Thank you, Cafe, for allowing us to be here on this Friday, Juneteenth. And if you are not talking about Juneteenth with someone, you should.
Yes.
Thank y'all, and we look to seeing y'all again.
And I think that probably we're going to share our next piece of the agenda in terms of breakouts. Judy had asked if anyone had any questions for the squad and for Manchester team. I think one question that I did see on the chat was, do you have students of disabilities on the squad, and did you reach out to students with disabilities?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. One question that came up on the chat box was, did you reach out to young people with disabilities?
Absolutely. So in thinking of diversifying, we think about the intersections as well, but that's something we also don't speak about because it is very personal and private. So students don't know who might have a disability or differently abled in the way that I like to reference it. Students who are ELL, we have students with varying experiences who we reach out to, but we don't focus on that when they come together because we want them to build a relationship outside of the things that have, that creates barriers for them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What I would say, I mean, I just took a few things. I just want to thank you so much. Your presentation it was well thought out, comprehensive. Really gave us a real map of what a community can do, and the idea of really looking at student voice and using youth as resources. So thank you so much for all of it. I mean, I broke down solidarity, equal voice, relationships, self-reflection. There's so much to unpack. How does your school community currently promote youth voice? Number one. And the second question, how could your school or community increase youth voice, particularly at this time?
I want to capture one aha moment from each of our groups. And so I was the facilitator in my group, and I'm going to say, hard to boil it down, right? One thing that came up is we talked about how to start. Manchester's pretty far along the path doing wonderful work. What are some things you know about starting? And what came up from many folks in the room who have experience with elevating youth voice is starting with restorative practices is a great way to start and start embedding that culture of the possibility of restoring relationships and also young people's responsibility for how they behave and how they communicate and how they create cultures in their school. So we got a big shout out to restorative practices. So let's go now to Latasha. There you are. Hi. What's an aha moment from you guys?
Is that this is something that people really want to take back. There's the questions around, like you said, Judy, how do we get started? And, those type of questions, which lets us know that this is something that people see as valuable, and that true, youth voice is really, really important and needed, not just to look good at a Board of Ed meeting.
For me, this aha moment came a while ago for me, but the challenge in defining co-led spaces and really authentic youth-led spaces as a school district is a challenge, but also a necessity. So that's something that came up in our conversation that I've been thinking about for a while now, but just want to highlight that.
Thank you. Let's see, Regina. Hi. What's an aha from your group?
So I think there were many, like everybody else, but one of the big ones was the real critical importance of having racial conversations, race at the center of the conversation. Because while people acknowledge that race intersects with a number of other things, right, like ability status or gender or language, the hard reality is that people make determinations and decisions and interact with you based on what they see first or based on their perception of who you are, and so that's race and color. And so that was a big one. And the other really important one is the necessity to start in preschool, right? To begin there, to make sure that children and their families, whatever those families look like, whoever they include, are affirmed, and that children see themselves in classroom spaces, and giving them a voice to help you understand what affirms them rather than you thinking that you know how to affirm them. So active listening is critical.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you got snaps from Latasha on that. Let's see, Ashley. Hi there.
Hello. So takeaways from our group, I think, is there's so many takeaways, but I think one of the major ones was that this work has to start in preschool. And we have to create some sort of structure where it transcends through primary to secondary, and not only just start at the middle school level into the secondary, because our babies are ready for this dialogue. And that, we need to create these spaces for them because students already have voices. They already have lived experiences that they can share. And how are we discerning the difference between youth leadership and youth voice, so amplifying youth voices, because some students have the skills and some need to develop those skills through active engagement. I think I merged like 4 into 1, but also that a lot of students with marginalized identities have this embedded resilience that we need to acknowledge instead of looking at them from a deficit mindset, and utilize their strengths and intelligence to kind of plan forward.
Thank you, so important. And Betsy.
Right, embedded resilience. So I just, I was very fortunate in my group because I had Mariana Smith, who was a student in Manchester. And so we talked a lot, but it was really incredibly important, again, to hear Mariana's perspective. And so I asked in the end, if you had to say something to adults right now, and probably she should have been one of the people speaking for, congratulations, Manchester, you're growing great young people. What she said is solidarity. We need adults to stand behind us. We need the space to be able to speak. We need action as a result of what we're doing. So again, great job. Great job. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, everyone in my group. It was a very, very good group, and definite actions that people planned on taking as a result of the group. So we're just in our last little piece here, right? We are recruiting advisory, Friday Cafe Advisory Committee folks. So if you're interested, please contact either Judy or myself. And I do want to thank, again, I want to thank Manchester for their fabulous presentation. I would like to thank Dr. Hopkins for being here, Regina, and also the correct people behind the scenes who have been wonderful doing the work, and that is Gloria Mar Clodio and also Francisco Baez for doing the fabulous work to keep us on point. So I think we're 5 minutes over, but we thank you all so much.